hobby is healing. Within the normie 5e sphere of the TTRPG hobby, the concepts of consequences for failure and player character death is being forced onto players and DMs who have only ever interacted with the game through theater kit antics, ignoring rules and hand-waving critical aspects of the game and its mechanics. Many of these people have picked up Baldur's Gate 3 thinking it will be like their perception of what the game is, which is Critical Role. Instead, they are met with a game that is challenging and provides real consequences for failure, like character death. And sometimes, that character's death happens within the story at the most anticlimactic moments. This really seems to be frustrating people. There are many more examples of people complaining about the difficulty of the game, along with other things like how tieflings are treated, which is a whole can of worms I'm not talking about. Really tired of it. It really amazes me how many are struggling, and I think it shows the radical departure of the game from its origin. The game was always deadly, the game always required critical thinking, like the journalist who used a spell to kill a spider by pushing it over the edge. That's how players defeated encounters more often than not, because the monsters in original Dungeons & Dragons, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and the basic expert BECMI sets are terrifying to even strong player characters of a decent or moderately high level. Many want to blame 5e itself as a system for causing this expectation of the game being essentially I win for players. But 5e was not always like this. Yes, everyone is magical. It isn't my favorite edition of the game by a long shot, but in 2014 when it came out, the game was serviceable fun.
Thank you, Lyle. You can go home.
But is it, like, you think it's okay? It's clean?
It is acceptable.
And light years ahead of 4e in terms of design. 5e is a lot like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition. The base game and the core rules is relatively fine, and it was later ruined by bloat, which fundamentally changed the way the game was played and broke it in a lot of ways. This also happened to 3.5, in my opinion. One thing to keep in mind is that the 5e crowd often doesn't play 5e. Many of us hate 5e because of the way 5e people play the game, but the way they play the game is not how the rules are written on the core 2014 books. Now, I'm not going to say that the rules are amazing in 5e, they are again serviceable fun in the context of the 2014 core rules. That said, I obviously have no desire to run that edition for my players again. I have Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Original Dungeons & Dragons, BX, BECMI, the Rules Cyclopedia, a plethora of other clones and completely different games and systems that I'm far more interested in than 5e. But many 5e fans are not actually fans of 5e. This is again a confusing statement, I know. However, many do not read their rules and admit to running games without owning the books. They learn through watching actual plays. They are fans of a version of 5e that doesn't actually exist within the core rulebooks. And this version of 5e is the version of 5e that is incredibly popular, not the version inherently written in the rules. Let's look at milestone leveling, for example. The method of milestone leveling presented in the core 3 books is not the same as what you see many 5e talking heads espousing. These people are not playing 5e. They are playing something else. I want to hammer this home because it's critical as to why Baldur's Gate 3 is so hard and frustrating to 5e gamers right now. Baldur's Gate 3 was negotiated between Wizards of the Coast and Larian Studios in 2017. The idea of what 5e was back in 2017 was very different than now. In 2017, I was still running 5e myself quite a bit. It was still my main version of the game. In 2017, Critical Role was still new. It was gaining popularity, but it wasn't the juggernaut in the hobby like it is now. It wasn't shaping expectations and perceptions just as heavily yet, and once development started, it's obvious that Larian Studios was looking at what 5e was from 2014 to 2017, and created a game based on that. Baldur's Gate 3 uses the 5e rules. All the spells and classes and races are there. This is why I find it funny when I see 5e people saying they struggle with the rules and systems of the game. It's 5e as a video game. If they read the rules, they would probably not have any problems, but they didn't read the rules, so they do. Not only that, but in a PC Gamer article from 2019, the following is said: "There are some things on the chopping block, however. It's an interpretation of D&D, specifically 5th edition, because porting the core rules, which Larian tried to do, doesn't work. Or it works, Vink clarifies, but it's not fun at all. One of the culprits is missing when you're trying to hit an enemy, and while the combat system has yet to be revealed, you can at least look forward to being able to smack people more consistently. You miss a lot in D&D. If the dice are bad, you miss, he says. That doesn't work well in a video game. If I do that, you're going to review it and say it's shit. Our approach has been implementing it as pure as we can, and then seeing what works and what doesn't. Stuff that doesn't work, we start adapting until it does. Not understanding the mechanics of Baldur's Gate, along with complaining that it is hard while the game is actually easier than the rules implied in the core rulebooks, only indicates to me that these people who think they are fans of 5e have finally encountered the rules they refuse to use and play with. They encountered the real 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Personally, I think this is good for the hobby. My hope is that the realization hits that these people have been playing a completely different game since they entered the hobby in 2020, during the pandemic of unspecified origin. I'm not saying I want you to go out and buy the 2014 core rulebooks for 5e if it's an edition that you've moved on from, like I have, but maybe understand that it isn't so much those 3 core rulebooks that suck, but the people that claim to be fans of them that do. Mostly because they refuse to read the books for a game they put on a pedestal. And when encountered with the real game they say they love, they actually hate it. They expose themselves for not reading the rules and liking a perception of the game that isn't found anywhere in the rules. I've long felt that the best way to save and reclaim the hobby for gamers is for the divide between the game the true gamers play and the game the others are playing to grow and become wider. And I think 5e stands picking up a video game that makes them play the closest they've ever been to rules as written is just the thing to make this realization happen. Anyways, that's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, share the video, support the channel on Subscribestar, on my Guilded server, or right here on YouTube. And until the next video, guys, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.